Mayor Sayak, we have 7 attendees back. I think it might be okay to get started.
Okay, and the email's gone out to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much, Auden, for that. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We are now beginning our open session. As mentioned, we did have closed session where we discussed legal counsel pursuant to Government Code Section 54957B. During closed session, the executive board accepted Kat Wellman's resignation as our temporary and interim legal counsel and appointed Gary Baum as our new legal counsel. And with that, I now look to the board. First, before I do that, I'm moving to our consent agenda. And so for our members of the public, would anyone on our public like to speak on what is on our consent agenda? And so Mary Lynn Bernald, actually Councilmember Bernald.
Muted. All right. Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are. Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'd like to pull consent agenda item 2D, the approval of an invoice to be billed.
Okay, 2D is pulled. Is there any other member of the public who would like to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, I will close public testimony, look to my colleagues to approve the remainder of those items that are on consent, except for 2D.
I move approval.
A second, Abikoga.
Okay, and if we could do roll call.
Okay, Blankley,
Yes.
Blankley, I, Mock,
Yes.
Mock, I, Abikoga,
Hi.
Abikoga, I, Jones,
Aye.
Jones, I, Zhao Saratoga,
Aye.
Zhao, I, Sayok,
Aye.
Sayok, I, Flieger,
Yes.
Flieger, I, Chow,
Aye.
Chow, I, Bybee,
Aye.
Bybee, I, Klein,
Aye.
Klein, I, Constantine,
Aye.
Constantine, I, Turner,
Yes.
Turner, I, and is Montano present?
Yes, I'm here. Aye.
Montano, I. All right, and with 13 ayes and 2 absent, we have the motion carries.
Okay, wonderful. And we will listen to 2D after we hear from the LAC. And so if we can, let's move straight into our planning collaborative updates. It is item 4. We are receiving a presentation from our consultants, Baird and Driscoll Community Planning, on the status of the planning collaborative, after which we will open the floor for board discussion. Okay, and then Andy, do we have all of our guests?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And welcome.
Thank you. And thank you for inviting me to present this evening. I know you've had a packed agenda. I watched about an hour of the meeting before you went into private session. So a lot on your respective plates. So what we'd like to do this evening is to give you an update on the work plan for the Santa Clara County Planning Collaborative, focusing on affirmatively furthering fair housing and our upcoming countywide community engagement process, which will be launching in July and then going into the fall. So if it's all right, I would like to share my screen, and I have just a brief presentation to share. Okay. Just as a reminder, the Baird and Driscoll team that's providing technical assistance to the countywide planning collaborative consists of myself, Paul Penninger. I'm a principal with Baird and Driscoll Community Planning, my colleague Joshua Abrams, and Daisy Quinones, who is really integral to helping us both manage the community collaborative meetings that we conduct on a monthly basis, and also provide technical assistance and training materials in between the meetings. Our collaborative work plan priorities, which we developed in partnership with your staff in all of the jurisdictions, are the following. And this is really based on a pretty intensive back and forth between us and staff, and also presenting this draft work plan to you at a meeting, I believe in February, Andy. And what we're focusing on are really four things. So we're focusing on providing one-on-one technical assistance and training and materials and support around developing sites, inventories, and analysis. As most of you know, the housing element for the upcoming round is going to have much more rigorous requirements for local jurisdictions in terms of identifying sites that might be suitable for housing, in particular lower income housing during the planning period. So one key work plan priority for us is to help staff in the jurisdictions identify sites and to put together inventories that comply with state regulations and also meet local community needs. We've also been asked to work on an outreach and community engagement strategy. So once again, providing best practices, materials, and trainings to staff, and also convening county-wide and sub-county meetings where jurisdictions can come together and do outreach jointly. And we'll talk a bit about that in a minute. We're also focusing on affirmatively furthering fair housing. And this is one of the key topics that I'm going to present this evening, providing technical assistance and training to staff on how to integrate new requirements around affirmatively furthering fair housing in the housing element update. And then finally, this is something that we addressed today at the collaborative meeting, providing templates and best practices for local jurisdictions that are interested in adopting local preferences ordinances for affordable housing to provide preferences for local residents, workers, people at risk of displacement, and potentially people who live in specific neighborhoods. So these are our collaborative work plan priorities. This isn't the entirety of everything that we do. We also do a lot of sort of ongoing technical assistance and training related to everything having to do with the housing element, but these are our priorities. So this evening, I wanted to talk in some greater depth about affirmatively furthering fair housing. And this really is something that comes from a bill that was passed called AB 686, which has a pretty thoroughgoing effect on the housing element update process. And in particular, it requires much more in-depth study of housing demographics, focusing on issues around race, income, access to housing, and access to opportunity. So looking at areas that are considered high opportunity areas, areas with jobs, with access to transit, with access to parks and open space, and other amenities vis-a-vis where housing is located. Also ensuring that public engagement reaches all segments of the community. So AB 686 and the new affirmatively furthering fair housing rules related to that really ask local jurisdictions to do a very complete job of addressing all segments of the community, meaning different linguistic groups, economic groups, ethnic and racial groups, people who are in the disabled community, older individuals, families, really the whole broad spectrum of residents in Santa Clara County and across the state. A key element, and this connects back to the sites inventory, is to plan so that sites designated for lower income housing or that are upzoned are not disproportionately planned for in lower income communities of color. And then finally, developing policies and programs that advance equity. These are the kind of broad outlines of what 686 requires and what all sections of the housing element will need to address during the planning update. Some specific guidance from the State Housing and Community Development Department was just released, and there's going to be a training on this guidance provided by HCD staff along with ABAG staff on June 22nd as part of ABAG's technical assistance training series. All of your staff in Santa Clara County have been invited to attend this training. I will be helping to facilitate a breakout room specifically for Santa Clara County. And it will be an opportunity for folks to ask questions of HCD staff, of ABAG staff about this guidance, which has just been released, which is fairly exhaustive guidance on how to make sure that you're integrating AFFH requirements throughout the housing element. Some of the key potential types of programs or policies that that communities are looking at and that have been integrated into housing elements in Southern California jurisdictions that have already updated their housing elements pursuant to these new AFFH rules have to do with, once again, ensuring that new housing is not placed disproportionately in lower income communities of color, and also identifying suitable sites for lower income housing in what are considered higher opportunity areas. And you may be asking, what does the state mean by higher opportunity areas? And the state has provided a data viewer and additional mapping tools and demographic and economic analysis to point communities towards what might be considered high resource or moderate resource or low resource areas based on an index of different economic and environmental and other types of data. So this screenshot right here shows the general guidance for Santa Clara County identifying the highest resource areas in this purple color, the high resource areas in kind of the blue color, and then going down into lower resource or high segregation and poverty areas in the lighter colors. Now, obviously, this is an imperfect tool. Some of the areas that are identified as low resource areas are indeed open space, parks, and other areas that are not urbanized parts of the county. So this is just one of many tools that the state has provided for you to help staff understand what is meant by high resource versus low resource areas. And I can answer questions about that if any of you have questions or comments when we get into the discussion. In addition to focusing on and really coming directly out of our need to focus on affirmatively furthering fair housing, we've been asked to put together what we're calling Let's Talk Housing Santa Clara County, which will be a cross-jurisdictional collaborative effort to give residents the opportunity to talk about housing needs in a new way and to really broaden the conversation as much as possible in a way that allows people from different groups that might not always get involved in public policy discussions about housing really to plug in. And I'll show you some more interesting slides than just bullets on a PowerPoint slide in a minute. But the basic elements of our work plan around this Let's Talk Housing Santa Clara County effort have to do with creating a sub-county meeting. And so the first round of sub-county meetings, which are an introduction to housing policy, will take place in July and then going into August. Having a second meeting as staff direct us, that's just about the regional housing needs allocation process so that community members can ask in-depth questions about RHNA and really understand what RHNA is, and have a completely open back and forth dialogue with us as your technical assistance providers about RHNA. And then finally, a second set of meetings, possibly in the fall, that focuses on policies and programs. Equally important to these meetings, which will initially be conducted via Zoom, and possibly, if possible, we would like to do in-person meetings if it's logistically feasible. But equally important to the meetings are the creation of a website, which will be a Let's Talk Housing Santa Clara County website, which will have a landing page for each jurisdiction that wants to participate. And this will provide a complement to your jurisdiction's outreach policies or outreach programs and efforts. And an equity advisory group, which will work alongside the effort to provide an opportunity for community-based organizations across the county to plug into this effort and to advise us and to advise city and county staff on the best way to reach underserved populations that might not always plug into public engagement processes, either because of linguistic obstacles or for other reasons. We've already, at Baird & Driscoll and working with our clients and colleagues through the 21 Elements process in San Mateo County, created a kind of template for this. And this is what it looks like. This is just one of the slides that we prepared for that effort. And we're going to adapt this, of course, to Santa Clara County and have something that looks and feels like Santa Clara County. And we'll be making a real effort to provide resources in Spanish, in Vietnamese, in Chinese languages from the outset so that our materials are as accessible as possible. But this is the kind of look and feel of the materials that we're going to put together. Not wonky, not directed primarily towards policymakers or towards people who are familiar with policy language, really geared towards the general public to have an open discussion about what housing is, why it matters, and how the housing element can be an opportunity for the community to talk about and shape the future of housing. This is a kind of general look and feel of the materials that we put together for San Mateo County and what we will build on for Santa Clara County. So that is what I have to present. We wanted to get your questions about affirmatively furthering fair housing, your feedback and advice on how to make sure that we as your staff are working with all of the jurisdictions to integrate these issues around affirmatively furthering fair housing in the housing element update, and also to get any feedback or advice or comments you have about the community outreach process.
Okay, thank you, Paul. And so colleagues, any questions or comments based on what you have heard? Oh. Nisa.
Thank you, Mariko, and thanks for that presentation, Paul. I had a question about the community engagement and outreach process you just went over. As you know, many of our cities have already moved forward with a housing element update consultant, and this is a key component of at least our city's contract with the consultant, and I wouldn't want to duplicate efforts. And so could you share with us how you plan to work with or housing element update consultants? Because a lot of what you described, I think, is what we're also expecting from our consultant to do.
That's a great question. Thank you. And your staff have been attending the collaborative meetings. And when the scope of work was developed, that was taken into account, that we are not going to duplicate work that you're hiring your consultants or asking your staff to complete around community engagement. This is meant to be a complement to that. And it's meant to also provide resources and materials that you can integrate into your community's update process. So one of the key aspects of this is that it will be jurisdictions coming together to do these meetings. So people from different communities will be in the same Zoom meetings, hearing the same information and participating. And then also that there will be an opportunity for the Equity Advisory Group working alongside the process to advise both the Let's Talk Housing Santa Clara County effort and also individual jurisdictions. So all of the feedback and the lessons learned and all of the engagement that we do will feed back to your staff and to your consultants. And we are very aware that we do not want to duplicate the efforts that your staff and consultants are undertaking in any of your communities, but to have something that's really a value add.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you. Councilmember Montano.
Thank you. Yes, I really appreciate the fact that you're including the community. I mean, you know, the housing elements is usually a city, you know, it's like their own, they have their own territory, if you will. But what I like about what you're doing is you're including, you're being more inclusive. And I really like that because you're voices that have not had a chance to be heard. And I really appreciate that. And that's that equity piece in there. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And thanks to your staff and to the guidance that we've been given from staff about what their priorities are and what they want us to work on. And also this is something that's really important for communities to address because of the AFFH guidance, that the way of doing community outreach that's perhaps traditional, that's been adopted by cities and counties in California in the past, of doing one-off workshops and planning commission and city council meetings, is not going to be sufficient this time around. That communities are really being asked to take an extra effort to go into the community and to make sure that all voices are heard, even if it's through non-traditional ways. So appreciate your comment and just want to give credit where it's due to staff who've asked us to work on this.
Paul. That was nice. Vice Mayor Chow.
Hi, thank you for your presentation. I'm trying to understand, it's great that there is a tool the state provided to identify which area is high resource or not. I have been trying to understand how do they identify an area as high resource or not? Do they take into account of for example, the city property tax revenue, or for example, school district in revenue? For example, in Cupertino, I think it's well known that we are the lowest funded in the state. Our school district gets 80% of funding per student compared with state average. But then we have to pay as high income for our teacher and administrators with other basic aid district around area. So our school district is very, very extremely low resource. It relies on parents to send their kids to after school classes. Parcel tax, very low amount couldn't pass in our community because our families are strapped for dollars just to afford this address. They don't have a lot of extra income. And then for cities, I always envy Santa Clara and other cities like Palo Alto. They have a lot of city equity to put the community center, to put the libraries. Cupertino has one community center, one library, and we don't have a lot of city resources, and we don't have a lot of retail or business. And the city has been conscious of not building office like crazy because we are conscious of the impact it will have on housing. So do they take this into account when they decide if a community is high resource or not?
I don't know in the map that I showed you earlier whether or not fiscal data points are taken into account. I know that they looked at things like unemployment rates, jobs to housing ratios, school quality ratings, so the quality of schools. I'm not sure that in the index that I showed you that was mapped earlier that they've taken into account any fiscal considerations, although there are maps that do that. So I think that's something that we can ask HCD staff when they do their in-depth training on the 22nd. And certainly it's something we could follow up with you on if you're interested in finding out more about what specific data points they used. I'm not sure that they used any fiscal data points.
That would be great. Yeah, because they should consider governmental resources and not just resources that's individual.
I can,
Financial.
I can put in the chat the link to the data resources hub that has been provided by HCD. There are a variety of mapping and data resources, not just one. And so I think it would be worthwhile for us to perhaps follow up on this for you and get back to you with some more specific information about whether or not they ever have considered fiscal trends.
Be great. Thank you. Vice Mayor Jones.
Thank you, Mariko. Paul, I'm glad that you brought up the issue of doing the same things over and over again in terms of outreach. We have to reach the residents where they are, which means leveraging community-based organizations, community leaders, religious institutions, all of the channels to touch and reach those residents that we want to be notified, educated, and be able to apply for these housing opportunities. So I just want to make that point that as you develop your strategy and as cities develop our strategies, that we have to focus in on trying to get the information to the people where they are.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And that is one of the purposes of the Equity Advisory Group, which will be composed of community-based organizations. I think that we talked about this with staff today, and we're going to be going back to staff to ask for recommendations on CBOs and neighborhood groups that should be involved in this Equity Advisory Group, because it's a very key element of our outreach effort that it not just be traditional forums for community involvement.
And Mayor Klein.
Sure. And thank you, Paul. And we've discussed some of these issues regarding the housing and unhoused subcommittee. And I just want to ask, what Chappie was just talking about as far as outreach and making sure that, our cities are doing the appropriate outreach. As we're going to different languages and things of that nature, I think it will become a very personal outreach, much like COVID vaccinations and COVID testing has been over the last year. And I think utilizing the county resources, and I don't want to speak for Steve at all here, but I do think that it's important, that relationship that we built over the last year be utilized for this also if possible. But I do think that looking at different languages, there was a lot of efforts by the county to try to deal with multiple languages, multiple areas of interest over the last year, trying to get the word out for testing for vaccinations. And I think I'm hoping that those avenues will be reutilized again as far as this outreach effort is concerned.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I now open public testimony. Would like to see if anyone from the public would like to speak on this item. I see one hand. Tina Walia of Saratoga.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Paul, for your presentation. This is Tina Walia, Saratoga Vice Mayor, and I'd like to follow up on the same issue that is about the community engagement regarding this housing element update. Do you have any materials you could support and send, or anything specific beyond what you have just mentioned on this subject?
We have, thank you for your question. We have materials from other communities and we have best practices. We haven't yet developed the specific materials for Santa Clara County. We will have a website, a draft website that will be up before the first set of meetings. So we're targeting July 12th as the date for that. And there will be materials in Spanish and Vietnamese and simplified Chinese. And we have to think about other languages and then what other spoken languages we might want for simultaneous interpretation. So we will keep your staff posted on when materials are available. I did speak with your staff last week and I'm aware of where you are in your community engagement process. Congratulations on that. It's a lot that's already been done in Saratoga. So we will definitely be preparing opportunities and materials rather, and keeping your staff posted on when those are available.
Okay, what about the current best practices? Would it be possible to send that, because
Sure.
July 12th is a month away?
Absolutely, and yeah, absolutely. And there was a training that we conducted for ABAG on best practices in community engagement, including best practices and new tools that are available to practitioners, like things like Miro or other tools that allow more interactive participation via Zoom and other tools like this. So absolutely, we can provide all of that information to your staff and to you on best practices and what things that we recommend that cities incorporate as part of their community outreach process.
That'll be fabulous. I would really appreciate that if you could send it to me via staff or via Andy Jordan.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Vice Mayor Walia. Anyone else from the public? Seeing no other hands raised, I am going to close public testimony. And thank you very much, Paul, for joining us today. As you saw, this is of high interest to many of our colleagues. And so we will be circling back, in any of the materials that you follow up on, if you could just send that to Andy, and Andy can send it out to everyone. So thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity.
Absolutely. And following on that note, it's interrelated. We will get a RHNA appeal process update from Mayor Fligor, who is also joined by Gillian Adams from ABAG and MCC. And so I give you the floor, Mayor Fligor.
Thank you, Mayor Sayoc. And I will be turning it over to Gillian Adams, but just a quick introduction. As you know, I am one of your 2 representatives on the ABAG Executive Board, and I also serve on the ABAG Administrative Committee, which will actually be hearing the RENA appeals. And so I thought it was very important for our association to hear from ABAG on this process because as you will see in Gillian's presentation, the deadline to file an appeal is coming up, and I want to make sure that all the cities in Santa Clara County are aware of the process. And so we're very lucky to have Gillian Adams, who is a principal planner for RENA. She's the one who presents to the executive board on RENA and the appeals process. So we're very lucky to have her. Gillian, are you here? And I know you have a presentation as well. Thank you so much for making the time for this meeting. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Nisa, and good evening, everybody. I'm happy to be here. Again, my name is Gillian Adams. I've been the project manager for the Regional Housing Needs Allocation process. I do have some slides to share with you. Let me see if I can pull that up. Okay. And so just as a kind of recap of where we are in the RENA process. At its meeting in May, on May 20th, the ABAG Executive Board approved the final RENA methodology and the draft RENA allocations. Those were released to local jurisdictions and HCD on May 25th. And the release of the draft allocations is what initiates the appeals phase of RENA. And ABAG is going to be conducting that process over the summer and fall. And that will be followed by approval of the final RENA plan by the end of the year. So in my presentation today, I'm going to provide an overview of some of the key milestones and the timing for the RENA appeals process, the requirements for filing an appeal, and then the procedures for how ABAG will consider appeals. So housing element law allows a jurisdiction or HCD to appeal a jurisdiction's draft allocation. In past RENA cycles, an appeal could only be brought by a jurisdiction appealing its own allocation. However, now HCD has the authority to bring an appeal, and a jurisdiction can also appeal another jurisdiction's allocation. So that's something new for this cycle. The major steps in the appeals process are that a jurisdiction or HCD has 45 days following the release of the draft allocation to submit a written appeal to ABAG. This is followed by another 45-day period where a jurisdiction or HCD can submit a comment on any of the appeals filed. ABAG must then conduct a public hearing to consider the appeals and the comments it received before making a final determination. So if a jurisdiction appeals the draft allocation of another jurisdiction, the jurisdiction that is the subject of the appeal will have an opportunity to respond to the appeal during the public hearing. So looking ahead at kind of the next steps in the process. So as I mentioned, May 25th was the official release date for the draft RENA allocations. The deadline, again, there's that 45-day period. So that sets up the deadline for appeals to be submitted to ABAG as July 9th. ABAG will then notify all jurisdictions, HCD, and interested parties about the appeals that were submitted. We have a page on our website where people can sign up, members of the public and others can sign up to be added to the interested parties list if you want to be notified about the appeals that were received. But again, we'll be sending communications directly to local jurisdictions as well. The deadline for comments on any of the appeals submitted will be at the end of August. And again, ABAG will notify jurisdictions, HCD, and interested parties about the comments that are received. In September and October, ABAG will conduct a public hearing to consider the appeals and the comments. ABAG is required to give jurisdictions at least 21 days prior notice about the appeals hearing. That will be followed in October or November, where ABAG will ratify the written final determination on each appeal and issue the final RENA allocations that will include any adjustments that result from the appeals process. And then lastly, in November or December, the ABAG Executive Board will conduct a public hearing to adopt the final RENA plan. So turning now to details about filing an appeal, as I mentioned previously, only a local jurisdiction or HCD can submit an appeal, but applicants can file an appeal for any jurisdiction in the Bay Area. Housing element law identifies a limited and narrow set of circumstances where a jurisdiction or HCD can appeal the draft allocation. The three eligible bases for an appeal are that 1, ABAG failed to adequately consider information submitted as part of the local jurisdiction survey. ABAG conducted this survey in early 2020 and, as required by law, requested information related to the factors identified in housing element law that have to be considered in the RHNA methodology and information about affirmatively furthering fair housing. 2, that ABAG did not determine the jurisdiction's allocation in accordance with its adopted methodology and in a manner that furthers and does not undermine the RHNA objectives. And lastly, a significant and unforeseen change in circumstances has occurred in the local jurisdiction or jurisdictions that merits revision of the information that was submitted as part of the local jurisdiction survey. And this last one, an appeal on this basis can only be made by the jurisdiction where the change in circumstances occurred. Housing element law also specifies certain criteria that cannot be used as the basis for reducing a jurisdiction's allocation. This includes any local ordinance, policy, voter-approved measure, or standard that limits residential development, underproduction of housing from the last RHNA cycle, or stable population numbers in a jurisdiction. Housing element law also requires that an appeal be based on comparable data that's available for affected jurisdictions and accepted planning methodology, be supported by adequate documentation, include a statement as to why the revision is necessary to further the RHNA objectives, and be consistent with and not to the detriment of the development pattern in Plan Bay Area 2050. ABAG MCC staff had developed a form for jurisdictions to use to submit an appeal that highlights some of these key requirements. So this slide summarizes the experience that other councils of governments have had with the appeals process for this RHNA cycle, as well as ABAG's experience in the last RHNA cycle. You can see there was a lot of variation in the number of appeals received, and as a result, the amount of time needed to conduct the public hearing for considering appeals. So in the Sacramento region, they did not have any appeals submitted. In the San Diego region, there were 4 appeals submitted, with one of them partially upheld. And then in the Los Angeles region, there were 48 appeals, and 2 of them were partially upheld. And then as a comparison to ABAG's experience in the last RHNA cycle, there were 8 appeals and 3 of them were upheld. So this slide provides an overview of the procedures that ABAG has adopted for conducting the appeals hearing. At its meeting in May, the ABAG Executive Board delegated the authority for hearing and making the final decisions about appeals to the ABAG Administrative Committee. The statute specifies that the appeals be considered in a single public hearing. However, it's possible that ABAG could receive enough appeals that the hearing would need to be continued over several days. For this reason, the Administrative Committee will consider the appeal for each jurisdiction sequentially and issue a preliminary determination. The committee will then hold a final meeting to ratify its decisions to ensure it was uniform in its decision-making for all of the appeals. And then when considering appeals, an administrative committee member will be required to recuse themselves from considering appeal that affects the member's jurisdiction. So building on the experience of the other COGs, ABAG is proposing to use the structure shown here for hearing each appeal. It starts with an applicant making an initial argument summarizing its appeal, to which ABAG and MTC staff will provide a response, followed by an opportunity for rebuttal by the applicant. The structure gets more complicated in the event that a jurisdiction or HCD appeals another jurisdiction's allocation. In this case, the procedures allow for the subject of the appeal to respond to the initial arguments and offer a rebuttal after the staff response. Following the rebuttal, there's a time for public comment in advance of the committee's discussion and vote on the appeal. As I mentioned previously, this would be a preliminary vote that would then be ratified by the administrative committee at a meeting following the close of the public hearing. So if the administrative committee decides in favor of an applicant, there needs to be a methodology for redistributing the appealed units to other jurisdictions in the region. Housing element law states that if the adjustments total 7% or less of the regional housing need determination from HCD, then ABAG must distribute the adjustments proportionally to all local governments. The statute gives ABAG the flexibility to develop its own methodology to distribute an amount if it's greater than the 7%. ABAG has decided it will base the required proportional distribution on a jurisdiction's allocated share of the regional housing need, and will use the same approach for redistributing units regardless of whether the total number of units is less than or more than 7%. This is consistent with ABAG's approach in the previous RHNA cycle. In addition, applicants whose appeals are upheld would not be excluded from the redistribution of units. This ensures that a jurisdiction that won an appeal of a relatively small number of units is not exempt from taking responsibility for its share of units from other appeals that are upheld. It's also consistent with the statutory language that appealed units shall be distributed to all local governments. So that's kind of the overview of the appeals process. I know it's a lot of information. I did include a few links here for if you want to follow up. On the ABAG website, this is our RHNA homepage, but there is a page there specifically related to the appeals process. It provides kind of, again, a lot of the information that I just gave you here. You might want to take a look at the final RHNA methodology report. It provides an overview of what the methodology is and how it meets the statutory objectives and factors. And then also there's a RHNA appeals procedures document, which is the official document that was approved by the executive board for how we're going to conduct the appeals. And there's other information on our website, again, that you might find helpful, including some links to the specific government code statute if you want to read the language. Obviously, this was just a summary. It's a little more detailed. It's a short section of statute, which is nice, but still a little, it's pretty complicated. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for the comprehensive presentation, Gillian, and welcome again. Questions, council members? Okay, I see no hand. I see one hand raised. Yes, Councilmember Turner.
Yes, could you explain how one city would appeal another city's allocation? Under what conditions that would happen, please?
So essentially what you would have to do is the appeals bases are the same, regardless of whether you're talking about your own jurisdiction or a different jurisdiction. So if I go back here, so you would have to sort of look at these three options for what the basis for your appeal is and see how it applies to the other jurisdiction that you're interested in. So for example, we have a compilation of all of the surveys that were submitted on our website. So I imagine, and we've never had an experience like this, so this is my sort of hypothetical working through this question with you, but that you would maybe look at the survey submitted by a different jurisdiction and have some kind of information that you feel ABAG staff didn't fully take into account information that they provided. You know, it's a little hard for me to say, but again, the process is the same, and you would have to look at these three bases and come up with sort of the evidence to support your argument for why you think a different jurisdiction's number should be either higher or lower.
And Councilmember Turner, any further question? Thank you. Any other questions? Yes, Mayor Zhao.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned in September and October, ABAG will conduct public hearings on all those appeals. So who will be conducting? Is executive board members, or is, I mean, how many people on the board, who will be conducting, and how the decisions are going to be made by vote or right there and then?
So maybe Nasa, I don't know if you want to answer the sort of the questions about sort of who's on the committee. It's a standing committee of ABAG. It's not the full executive board. It's a smaller sort of subset of the executive board that has authority to essentially act in place of the executive board. So it does have representatives from throughout the region, but it is a smaller committee. And then in terms of the process, you know, again, because we're anticipating that we might have enough appeals that we're not going to be able to finish in one day. What the committee will do is take a preliminary, you know, hear all of the arguments, as I mentioned, with that hearing structure, take a preliminary vote, and then after the close of the public hearing, the administrative committee will have one more meeting where they sort of review the preliminary decisions that they've made on each appeal, just to make sure that, over time and as, different days, different things happen, that they were being consistent throughout. So it's an opportunity for them to just sort of clarify and confirm that their preliminary decisions are still the right decisions.
Any other questions? Okay, and I'm opening public testimony. Anyone in the public have a question or a comment based on this agenda item? I see no hands raised from the public, so I'll close public testimony and thank Mayor Fleiger and Gillian for bringing this to our attention. I know several cities have filed their appeals, and so it's informative and relevant, so thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we now move to agenda item number 6, which is our committee reports. And our first one will be our Racial Justice Committee. We are going to receive a report from our committee chair, which is Vice Mayor Jones. And he will also be joined tonight by Sunnyvale Chief of Police No and Lieutenant Mong for a presentation on behalf of the Santa Clara County Police Chief. So welcome. Welcome, Chief No, and Vice Mayor Jones, I hand it off to you.
Thank you, Mariko. So I first of all want to thank Chief No for making this presentation. He was former San Jose Deputy Chief, and I'm still trying to figure out how we can get him back to San Jose because I was heartbroken when he left. He did such an amazing job. And so when we formed our Racial Justice Committee, one of the first areas, obviously, we identified was public safety and public safety reforms. And so it was suggested to us that we approach the Santa Clara County Police Chiefs Association. And it just so happened that Chief No was the president of the organization. So we approached him, explained to him what we were trying to do and our objectives. And we arranged a meeting that we had on January 14th of this year. And I can tell you that we were so encouraged by the reception that we received from all the members in terms of really engaging with us, trying to understand what we were trying to accomplish, and giving us really good feedback and direction and support. So I'm really thankful for the efforts that the police chiefs have taken to try to come up with strategies to address public safety. And so I want to hand it off to Chief No, who's going to give a presentation on one of the initiatives that we identified.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Jones, for that nice introduction. And thank you to all the mayors and the Vice Mayor for having me here today, and Lieutenant Fabian Monghe, who's going to do the presentation on the virtual reality simulator training program that we want to implement. And first and foremost, on behalf of the police chiefs of the Santa Clara County, I want to extend our appreciation for the fact that Cities Association reached out to us. We had a meeting several months ago where Vice Mayor Jones, Mayor Fligger, I apologize if I mispronounced your name, and Mayor Rich Constantine attended with Rania and Andy, and had a really good discussion, a very robust discussion with the chiefs in terms of how the two associations can work together on police reform issues. I think most of you have received the matrix on the efforts that law enforcement agencies in Santa Clara County have done over the years, and not just recently because what has happened at the national level, but just probably over the last decade, some of the very progressive best practices that we have implemented here in Santa Clara County. But having said that, we know that we can always get better, and we're willing to always do things differently and be open to hearing from our communities on what we can do better in terms of transparency, in terms of community engagement, and in terms of what are we doing in dealing with a very critical issue that's facing law enforcement right now, and it's the use of force. Unfortunately, we have seen, during the last several years and over the years, there have been incidents where there's been use of force by law enforcement that have led to deadly encounters with the people that we have come in contact with. And this is something that as law enforcement leaders, as law enforcement officers, we want to do our best to mitigate, reduce, and eliminate those deadly encounters between law enforcement and people that we come in contact with. So having good, strong policies is a must. And the majority or all of law enforcement agencies have really strong use of force policy with their respective departments. And all the agencies emphasize on de-escalation. Training is critical, very critical, because if we have policies in place, we must provide our personnel training to make sure that they are in compliance with the good policies that we have set in place. Training is one thing, but how do you deliver that training? So it's realistic. It is something that emphasizes de-escalation. It is something that emphasizes how we deal with people in mental health crisis, and that's critical. And in light of the limitations on resources that we have to think outside the box, because real life scenario training takes up a lot of resources. A lot of people have to be involved, the role players, the trainers, and the officers. So about a year ago, I approached the regional manager of POST, and POST is a state agency that regulates law enforcement training and practices in the state of California. And I asked the manager if there's something out there that can help law enforcement agencies to train our officers better and to address some of the issues I mentioned to all of you here tonight. And so he talked about this virtual reality training simulator. It's a new program that POST has, and several agencies have been participating in this program. The Sacramento Police Department is one of the main agencies that currently uses this training system, and it's proven to be very beneficial for the department. I think there are like other agencies in the state of California also that are using this simulator. Here in Santa Clara County, we don't have an agency that is currently using the system yet, but we hope to have at least 3 or 4 agencies that would have access to the simulator, which is provided to the agencies at no cost. And so the San Jose Police Department and my department, we have applied to receive the simulator from POST. We have been told that sometime in the fall, we will be receiving this simulator. So that's great news. And then I think Palo Alto Police Department and the Sheriff's Office have since recently applied for the simulator also. My understanding is that Los Gatos Police Department is also looking at a simulator training component. I'm not quite sure whether it's the POST piece of equipment they're looking at or something else, but it is encouraging news. And so the ask today, hopefully after the presentation by my lieutenant, is that we ask that the association, the city's association, will be in full support of this program with law enforcement agencies there and encourage all cities to have their police department to participate in this program. And then also, if by chance the procurement or just of the simulator may be a little bit delayed for whatever reason, we would hope that the Cities Association would send a letter of support to POST on the simulator for the law enforcement agencies here in Santa Clara County that recently applied for the simulator, and then potentially future applications from other cities in Santa Clara County. And so with that, I would turn it over to Lieutenant Fabian Mulhay, who is in charge of training in my department, to give an overview of the simulator. And then afterwards, we'll open up for questions to the group there. So Thank you. Lieutenant Monet, you ready?
Yes, sir.
All right, it's all yours.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Fabian Monet. I am the police training lieutenant in charge of all law enforcement related training for Sunnyvale Department of Public Safety. As you know, everyone here in Sunnyvale is both fire and police. We have multiple training, well, one division, but different units within that division. So I represent the police side. So I'm going to open up my PowerPoint, and hopefully it allows me to share. And we'll move on from number one slide here. Okay, first up, what the simulator essentially is. And I'm going to definitely breeze through some of this because I know it's been a very long evening for many of you. Virtual reality decisions and tactics. It's a combination, and I'll go in detail what it comprises of, but a little bit of the background. As Chief No mentioned, a lot of our trainings are dictated by POST, California Police Officer Standards and Training. And some of it did get some guidance through the legislature, in particular through AB 392 and SB 230. So a little bit of background, SB 230 was the accompanying bill that provided funds to assist law enforcement agencies throughout California to implement a lot of the changes that basically came from the Stephon Clark incident in Sacramento. And that information and that training, different requirements and through the changes in classes and the procurement of this VRDT is part of the SB 230. So what it does is essentially covers costs for all the trainers. It does provide reimbursement for all involved trainers. All the equipment is all completely free. The only requirement is that we open the VRDT to outside agencies, which is going to be pretty important here as I get into some of the new requirements. Okay, what is and why is it a benefit, VRDT? Okay, so the benefits obviously is in officer involved shootings. We can go on and get into force science and tactics, physiological effects on the body and so forth. But OIS is obviously it's a huge impact. Number one, on the community, on the involved party, their family members, and the officer. So it assists in decision making under stress. What are the different trainings? What are the different studies that have indicated or recommended certain performance factors that affect performance under stress? And we'll go into that here in a second. And then, is VRDT compatible with ICAT? I'll go into what ICAT is. ICAT is a standard throughout the United States put together by PERF, the Police Executive Research Forum. I applaud Chief No for sending myself and numerous other lieutenants across the country to Virginia, and we became ICAT trained. Essentially, what ICAT training is, it has a lot of de-escalation and crisis intervention involved in a model. The model comprises of 5 different modules. It consists of critical decision-making model. It encompasses crisis recognition and response, tactical communications, operational safety tactics, and integration in practice. So luckily, along with the POST, we put together an ICAT post-approved course. It got approved late last year, early this year, and we actually trained our whole entire patrol team in the full ICAT application in February, and we conducted scenarios in March. And personally speaking, the requirement in terms of resources, time, logistics, just to put on any type of scenario, both of our teams represent almost 40 officers, officers and lieutenants. To have them go through multiple scenarios along with our dispatchers, it takes a lot of effort. So with this VRDT, it's going to provide an opportunity for us to provide ongoing virtual reality scenario-based training. It could happen on duty, it could happen off duty on a training day, but it's going to allow us to enhance the performance of our officers. In addition to, a lot of this is going to be post-required. a lot of requirements specifically for posts in terms of perishable skills training, and the requirements include emergency vehicle operations, firearms, defensive tactics, tactical communication. Well, they're adding a new requirement, and it's starting this year, where you have to do a certain amount of scenario-based training. So every single agency across California will have to provide it's been decided 4 hours of scenario-based training by the end of 2022. So 2022 December, every officer has to have at least 4 hours, which is going to be a huge endeavor. And then once again, the convenience to line personnel being able to utilize this program while on duty. Background, Mega Training Systems, and then they ended up rebranding into Inveris. Who are they? They're leaders in providing integrated and virtual weapons. They work with the U.S. Army, Marine Corps, law enforcement agencies, and throughout the world that they've worked and put systems together. And I know that initially some folks might see, oh, U.S. Army and Marine Corps, why are we working with a company that integrates with or provides training to the military? We're police officers. Well, to that, it's our job to provide and develop certain training scenarios that forces the officer to emphasizes a lot of our important standards that we're trying to implement. For example, the 4 tenets of procedural justice will implement a lot of those type of tenets, principle policing, such as giving voice to the individual that we're contacting, being neutral, displaying a high level of neutrality, showing respect, developing that trustworthiness, all leading to developing legitimacy, because we have to develop that legitimacy within our community, or else we're not going to be able to enforce the law. So I could see that as being a question, but I just wanted to just address it beforehand. It's upon each law enforcement agency in collaboration with POST to provide specific training that leads to enhanced interaction and community interaction, hence leading to legitimacy. Sorry. Next up, just kind of the going into the weeds. Weapon systems, they offer different types of weapon systems, but the purpose of why I'm putting this slide is it's very important because it showed that enhanced level performance equates to the system itself. The higher performing officer will be yielded from a higher level of system. And with this system, we're allowing and we're able to provide the exact equipment that the officer will be utilizing out in the street, which is very important because under those critical high stress incidents, you lose that fine motor skill. You lose that ability that you normally have because you're in a either fight, flight, or freeze moment. So it's important to be able to train and develop that high level of skill where everything is just flows very smoothly, if at all, hopefully. So the goal is to provide additional capabilities in existing training methodology, which is POST and ICAT. I kind of explained that here in just a couple slides back. And our methodology obviously incorporates a lot of de-escalation and a lot of CIT, which all comes from a lot of the ICAT model that we've instilled. So it breaks it into 3 different levels. The first level is marksmanship, showing the proper application and use of the firearm. Obviously, we want a higher performing officer, and that everyone I believe here can agree to that. Next comes up judgmental application. We want to instill scenarios so the officer can develop the type of judgment, crisis decision making that we want and can apply that to the street. It's very important to get reps and get individuals to perform at that high level. You only get to that level by continuous application of the model. And if you don't, then that's where instead of performing at a high level, an officer can be overstressed and now can end up making poor decisions. Being able to have that stress inoculation and address it in a constructive manner is imperative. The only way you get to that point is ongoing continuous training. And this application is going to allow us for it. Lastly, collective application, being able to have multiple officers work together in a high stress environment and utilize their training and their skills in terms of team communication, team movement. Unfortunately, we just saw what happened last 2 weeks ago. My condolences to all the VTA staff and families, but that's something that here in my office, in our department, we have to continuously have on the back of our mind, that it could happen, and it's happened before in Sunnyvale, unfortunately. So being able to perform at that high level as a team creates confidence, and thus we'll be able to provide a higher level of security and safety for the citizens when they do have to respond to a critical incident. Realistic imagery. Why is this important? Well, we want buy-in. We want buy-in, and I'm not sure if any of you interacted at a police training, but cops can be pretty hard on training. And for them to have, officers to have something that's realistic and constructive, they'll have buy-in. And this program provides a very high level of realistic imagery, which I believe will enhance and get that buy-in from each officer and be willing to participate in the training. There's different environments. Here's a day environment, pretty important, but almost half of our patrol team works at night. So our trainings, very seldom are we able to perform some type of training at night. We do have some scenario-based training going on today, right now as we speak, with some new recruits, but it's very hard to be able to apply and get folks to come in with schedules and so forth. Now I can bring in on-duty officers, run them through the virtual reality, and they're night shift officers, and they can get inoculated and confident in applying these techniques in the exact environment that they will be performing their duties. So I think that's incredibly important. Very realistic interiors. You can have hospitals, you can have offices, buildings, warehouses, lots of different really different environments. There's actually a section in here for it's like a firearms range where you can actually do some type of firearms training. That was really good, but the Post recently in a directive removed credit for any type of virtual simulator training related to firearms and emergency vehicle operations. Here in Sunnyvale, we never really participated in the firearms. It's always been actual hands-on training, but a lot of outside agencies did provide and get that kind of credit. But Post has decided that that is not going to continue, but you will get credit for the 4 hours of scenario-based training. Different type of environments, really, really important. What I'm really excited about is being able to 3D scan any location within our jurisdiction. There's numerous locations that I'm going to end up trying to 3D scan to help prepare the officers for any type of critical incident, and they'll know the interiors of certain hallways of certain Sunnyvale City Hall, maybe schools and so forth. So they're a little bit more prepared in what type of environment they're going to run into. And then some of the future applications that they're going to be applying. Skip over here. Here's some of the layouts, full entire campuses that they will provide. And this is continuously getting updated throughout their program. This is how the proposed system works. 10 by 20s, 10 by 30s. We've identified our Fire Station 5 up off of Bordeaux as going to be our location. We have a pretty large classroom there. Basically 4 tripods, 2 headsets, the full equipment. We have an instructor area where the instructor is able to change or adapt any particular scenario and be able to evaluate the 2 participants. This is how the system looks.
Hey, Fabian, I'm sorry. Can I interrupt you real quick and just go back to the prior screen? Where you show the room? Yeah. I want to just illustrate the point that Fabian mentioned earlier. Like in a typical scenario training, which will now be a requirement by Post, right? We would probably have anywhere from, depending on the size of the agency, I think even the smaller agencies, smaller than ours, would typically have like at least 20 people, and, Fabian said, for us, it's about 40 people. So as you can see, you have to get like volunteers to participate, officers, and it's 20 to 40 officers as opposed to what you're seeing right now in this room environment with this virtual reality. simulator. So, thank you, Fabian.
Thank you, Chief. So another big advantage is this is going to be portable. So we can transfer this. We work with different businesses, locations, and also larger rooms without the city. If a neighboring agency really needs, they're in a little pickle and they need to get some kind of training in, we're more than willing to work with outside agencies. But this is how the setup is going to be for us here at our North Training Center on Bordeaux. Yes, it looks a little bit cumbersome, but there's a video later on that we can link up. It's a news story through Sacramento, and you'll see it's pretty advanced system, all integrated, all our different weapon systems that we deploy with, and it's very, very advanced. I was extremely impressed. Essentially, what are we trying to accomplish here? What's the purpose of these VRs? Why is it so different than just regular scenario-based training, which is very seldom and time costly and resource costly. So VR can result in upwards of 80% retention rate by different studies after 1 year of a training, which is critical. Because we can have a training today and officers can be involved in a critical incident the next shift, or 11 months later, 12 months later. So being able to continue to provide it and have that retention is critical. Training time is more efficient. Time to learn a process is faster with less errors, and it translates to cost savings for overall training needs. The VR is able to increase retention, supplemental traditional instruction, and simulate real life scenarios, provides a high level of immersion when providing complex training equipment. And lastly, VR has been found to enhance empathy and emotion during training, which improves information retention. Obviously, we want to increase the level of confidence for these officers, at the same time providing that enhanced empathy and emotion, because we don't want robots out there. We want people who can evaluate a situation, understand what a person might be going through, and apply the techniques, the critical decision-making model in an appropriate manner, because we serve the community ultimately. Ancillary benefits, Citizens Academy, I put this in here, and city leadership. I think it's important to be transparent, to show the community that that's who we work for. And we serve the community, and it's important for legitimacy that they see what we're doing and what the training is, the purpose of it is. And being able to do that, especially in a firsthand manner, I think is incredible. I can only provide you a PowerPoint and do the best I can to explain the details, but overall being able to come to one of our sites and actually go through the scenarios and see how it's applied, what type of scenario it is, who's involved, what the communication level is, all that is very, very important. And once again, I sound like a broken record, but it lends to that legitimacy. And lastly, it provides a platform to showcase our department's training and our training model, that we are transforming, and we're constantly evaluating and looking ways to get better. We listen to the community, we listen to best practices, and we are willing to change. There's always a different manner in how to apply law enforcement. I started 23 years ago, and it was a lot different in 1998 than it is now. And with that, we've learned a lot of different techniques, and I believe wholeheartedly that we're providing a better service to the community. And we listened, and we're applying these new models. And I believe it, at the end of the day, it enhances our standing in the community if we change and we listen to the community as well, as much as possible. This is the footprint, the sizes. Ours is going to be I believe a 30 by 30. What it does at the end, the actual system, and it applies, gives us an opportunity to address critical faults. Any issues in the training and the performance, we're able to immediately address it, provide constructive feedback, and have them re-perform the scenario immediately, so we can re-emphasize and reinforce positive performance and address negative performance, ultimately molding that officer to a more enhanced model of performance. Once again, it's an opportunity to reemphasize our department's core values, which is, I think, is an awesome opportunity. Some of the Northern California agencies, a lot of these agencies are on board. I believe only Sacramento, as far as I know, has received it and has actually applied it with their officers at this time. Statewide agencies that have jumped on and are part of the program, it's across the whole state. Even some of the colleges have come on. What's the current status? So Post is opening up additional purchases from what I understand. We were part, I believe, the group 2, which closed, I think, sometime in April. And there has been some issues with some of the software programs. Obviously, I mean, that pretty much covers almost every entity, right? Some type of software issue with different programs, but we're looking to implementation of maybe sometime in the summer, end of summer and fall. And there have been some changes in the uses of force issues through Post, or some requirements. So we'll be able to tailor and change up a lot of the scenarios to apply that, especially some of the perishable skills requirements. They have changed, and we are applying for a new accreditation, if you will, by July 1st. But a lot of that new requirement will be implemented in the specific scenarios. And I know we were looking to go live on the system will be going live on May 24th through some of the other outside agencies. I believe Sacramento as well, but for us, that's going to be delayed. And here's a video. I'm not sure how we can link this or we can open this up. If you do have a couple minutes, but I think it's a pretty good news story in terms of, or report on the virtual reality, and you actually can see it being applied at Sacramento PD.
What we could do, Lieutenant, is we could take that link and then we could send it out to everyone that's at this meeting today so that they have the opportunity to view it.
Thank you, President.
And we'll go ahead and ask Andy to take that link in for you and send it out.
Perfect. Well, I can always email it also to through the actual invite as well.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, that concludes my quick presentation on what the virtual reality is. And if you have any particular questions, please feel free regarding the implementation or the actual unit itself.
Great. Thank you, Lieutenant. Very comprehensive.
Yes, and I also want to thank you, Lieutenant. Is it Manji?
It's Monje.
Monje.
Yeah. My parents are from Costa Rica, so I'm used to it getting switched around.
No worries, no worries. But I want to thank you for that presentation, and I know that we have a lot of questions, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask this body to hold their questions, because I'm going to we provide them with a pretty detailed list of recommendations, of which this is one of them. And so I'm going to ask the group to take those recommendations back to their cities and come back in August with feedback. And I'm sure they're going to have a lot of additional questions as well. So I want to invite you back to our August meeting to address all those additional questions.
Excellent. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Absolutely. I'll look forward to meeting with the group in August.
Fantastic. And then Mariko, I'm going to recommend that I defer my social justice presentation, but I also want to inform the group that we have provided a very detailed list of recommendations. And my request is that each person takes these recommendations back to their cities and get feedback and input on those recommendations, and then come back and we can have a more detailed and robust discussion in the August meeting.
I think that's a great idea. And if it's okay, if we can extend the invitation again to Lieutenant Monge and Chief Pham, that would be great. So that we have an opportunity to have a discussion based on everyone's review and actually getting the feedback from the council members of each individual city. That'd be great. So thank you both for attending tonight. We'll see you back in August. And I'm sure at that point we'll have many questions. And in between, if there's any other questions or more pieces of information needed, we'll work through Andy to get back to both of you. Yes,
Okay,
Andy?
we also have staff from San Jose Housing still on, and so we can probably let them go now as well.
Yes, I'm
And
gonna
I'm
let
so
them.
sorry, Joshua.
Well, I'll follow up with them and
Okay,
give them kudos for hanging out.
thank you, Chief.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Okay, and
Thank you, Chief.
but I do need to make sure I open the public testimony on what we just heard, even though we're not taking any action. And so I look at our attendees list. Would anyone like to speak to us on what on the Racial Justice Committee? Seeing none, if we could go to Mayor Constantine on our Legislative Action Committee that met prior to this.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I give my report, I'll just say that that link that was just sent out, it doesn't work. To the Fox 40, it's not correct. So maybe we'll have to go back to ask them to send us a better link. So with that, I'll go ahead and give my report. I'll make it as brief as possible. The committee received presentations today on SB 612 and SB 649. After the presentations, the committee voted to watch SB 649, which is from Senator Cortese. It's an affordable housing local tenant preference. And then the committee acted or voted to support SB 612, which is the ratepayer equity. And that's Portantino is the senator on that bill as well. We also voted to oppose SB 9 and AB 1401. The committee voted to support the state budget request for California cities. And there was one request to ask to track AB 1139, which is the net energy metering. However, it is listed as ordered to be inactive. So we'll follow up with the requester to make sure that we have the right bill that they were requesting us to track. And I believe there was one other thing on AB 1091. There was a survey that was sent out. We did not get a chance to discuss the survey, but we will be able to discuss it on subsequent meetings. And with that, Chair, if there's no questions, that concludes my report.
Are there any questions? And again, to the public, if there's anyone that would like to speak on the Legislative Action Committee. I see no hands raised. And so we move to item 2D, which was under consent initially. And if we can ask Councilmember Bernal to join us and I'll provide some comments. Yes, Councilmember Abikoga, I saw you raising your hand.
Do we need to vote on the lack?
Thank you for keeping me updated. Yes, we actually do. And so if we could pause on 2D, and I'm sorry, Mayor Constantine. So if we can bring a motion back for approval of what was recommended by the Legislative Action Committee. Would anyone like to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Perfect. Thank you. And Audit, if we could call the vote.
All right, Bybee.
Aye.
Bybee, aye. Montano.
Aye.
Montano, aye. Turner. Turner. I will mark Turner as absent. Abikoga.
Aye.
Abikoga, aye. Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, aye. Zhao.
Aye.
Zhao, aye. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, aye. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine, aye. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, aye. Sayak.
Aye.
Sayak, aye. Mock.
Yes.
Mock, aye. Blankley.
Yes.
Blankley, aye. And Chow.
Aye.
Chow, aye. And with 12 aye votes, the motion carries.
Thank you. And now we move to item 2D, which was approval of the invoice to be billed to the roundtable for executive director and legal counsel time from January to April. And if we could, let's see, is Councilmember Bernald, if she could be transferred over, and Ms. Bernald, if you could just share with us your comments.
Thank you very much. I respectfully request that item 2D be continued. On behalf of the SCSC Roundtable as chair, I would like the opportunity to review with the cities and roundtable.
Ms. Bernald, we lost you.
To the roundtable.
We didn't get that. We need to repeat that.
Mary Lynn, we lost you. Could you repeat again?
From the start?
Yes, we just heard that you request to defer.
Okay, I request that this item 2D be continued. On behalf of the roundtable as chair, I would like this opportunity to review with the cities and roundtable ad hoc committee how the items listed on these two bills were allocated to the roundtable. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., the cities and the roundtable ad hoc will meet. I believe this will provide that opportunity to discuss this matter and understand the allocation system.
Thank you very much. And any questions on the request?
No questions, but I support that recommendation. Do I need to put that in the form of a motion or?
Well, yes, but let's see if there's any other comments first.
Okay.
Any other comments from the public?
Oh, I had a question.
Seeing none. Okay, hold on. Let me close public testimony. And so now let's entertain questions.
I have a question, Chair.
Vice Mayor?
This is Montano. So Mary Lynn, you mentioned that the cities will be at the meeting. Are these the roundtable, the representatives for the roundtable, the cities? But what about the cities that are not part of that roundtable? Will they also be participating?
Am I still muted?
No, you are able to speak.
Okay, thank you. This is the ad hoc that was formed in an attempt to have a conversation about the future of the roundtable. So the Cities Association chose two representatives, Chappie Jones and Larry Klein, and the roundtable chose three representatives, Glenn Hendricks, Kathy Watanabe, and me as chair.
Okay.
And we have been able to have one meeting, and we were hoping to move forward with future meetings.
Okay, that clarifies it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Montano. Any other questions? Seeing none, and so Vice Mayor, if I could have you make your motion.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to defer that invoice and direct the conversation to the ad hoc committee meeting that's going to take place on Friday.
I'll second.
And there's a second. And so Auden, if you can call the question.
Okay, Blankley.
Yes.
Blankley, I. Sayok.
Aye.
Sayok, I. Montano. Montano.
Oh, aye.
Montano, I. Abakoga.
Aye.
Abakoga, I. Constantine.
Aye.
Constantine, I. Jones.
Aye.
Jones, I. Mock.
Aye.
Mock, I. Flagger.
Yes.
Flagger, I. Zhao Saratoga.
Aye.
Zhao, I. Klein.
Aye.
Klein, I. Chow Cupertino.
Aye.
Chow, I. And Bybee.
Aye.
Bybee, I. And with 12 ayes, the motion carries.
Very much. And so we look forward to that update, and when appropriate, just let me know when to put this back on the agenda, Vice Mayor. And we now move to the Santa Clara County City Managers Association update and Executive Director update that will be provided by Andy.
So first I wanted to let you know the city managers met, and I'm giving this on behalf of City Manager Pravetti from Los Gatos. The city managers met yesterday discussing cybersecurity and plans for reopening. Most cities are continuing to target August and September for reopening. Senior centers, community centers, and libraries are opening to the public early in June and July. Many will have hybrid council meetings, allowing for remote participation for council members and the public. The cities are continuing to coordinate on these reopening plans, and updates will be provided to the board as implementation occurs. So that is your update from Laurel. And then are you ready to go to my update?
Yes.
Is there any
I am.
comment
Thank
on
you.
that?
Go ahead.
Just wanted to let you know that last Saturday was the last Saturday call. And for all of those of you who participated, that was a long year. I think that we all found it helpful, and you know, I think that we look forward to a time where, when there is another problem, that we will more easily find a way to get together now with our renewed collaboration with the county. I wanted to let you know that we sent a letter for support for the Santa Clara County Innovation Project, which is their community mobile response. And Margaret did hear back that the county received the funding for that. And so I think we're all really, really hopeful that that program will be successful. Also, I wanted to let you know that the REAP grants that come from the state, and then it's funneled through ABAG, that a few weeks ago, the county passed a resolution making it official that the Cities Association is the recipient of the REAP and is in charge of the REAP funds for our collaborative. So that's great news. And the only other thing is I am out of town next week. So letting you all know that.
That's her polite way of saying no calls.
Auden will be available.
So that is your joy. We now are moving to joy challenges. Obviously, a challenge is that we ran late, but I am opening the floor to anyone who'd like to share a joy and challenge or challenge. Yes, Carmen.
Thank you. Thank you. So actually, I'm kind of piggybacking on Andy's, the vaccinations of the county coordination. That was awesome. And that showed true leadership from the county's part to gather all the cities together, represent the leaders from the cities, and it just showed amazing leadership. But I wanted to ask Steve Preminger, I'm trying to get vaccinations at the Great Mall, and I was wondering if you can help me with that, maybe offline later on, maybe I can get your number and we can connect.
I'd be happy to.
Okay, great, thank you. So you said something that's a positive. I'm trying to get our Old Town Main Street revitalized, and it's moving forward. So I don't know if anyone has ever been to Milpitas and our Old Town. It was really looking shabby, but we're trying to spruce it up and get some economic development in that area. So that's the positive. That's my happy, I guess. Thank you.
And when it's all done, invite us all over.
Oh yeah, great.
Mayor Klein.
Sure. And I just want to give one positive that last month we approved a new specific plan, at least the EIR evaluation for our Moffett Park, which included another 10 million square feet of office space. But we're looking, you know, I was on Planning Commission 15 years ago, and we'd never put housing out there, but now it's trying to create communities. So it's beyond additional office space. It's evaluating 20,000 units of residential, as well as 500,000 square feet of retail. And so it's actually creating, to a certain degree, a whole new city in our northern part. So really happy that you know, to try to create communities, walkable communities, open space. It's designing a city pretty much from scratch, and then having developers, Google, you know, Lockheed, big companies that are willing to take a chance, and it's on a new vision, and I'm really happy to see that. So thanks.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah, great.
Margaret.
Thank you. I was really excited the other night. We accepted a grant from Destination Home for $450,000 to assist us with our various homeless efforts. As you probably have read, we have a safe parking lot program. It's up and running now. Our Project Home Key project where we've received grant funding from the governor's program to do that. It's a transitional modular housing project that houses 100 or so people. And so I guess this is part of their, and I remember Jen Loving presenting to our group the report on ending homelessness, or the plan. And some I didn't know, but some of that I guess comes with funding. So I encourage all of your other cities to also look at efforts to address homelessness and reach out to Destination Home.
Awesome, congratulations. Any other joys and challenges? Okay, well, I apologize for the lateness in hour, but thank you for hanging in there, and meeting is adjourned at 9:29. Thank you.
Mariko,
all. Yes.
are you going to ask for general public comment?
Yes,
on any-
yes,
There
thank
go.
you. I was so
No
eager.
problem.
Public comments for anyone remaining in our attendees list, if you'd like to speak to us on any item that has not been discussed. Seeing no hands raised, I now bring us back, and now I adjourn us. So have a
You
good
just wanted
evening.
Kat to work to the last minute.
There you go. And I just want to say again, thank you so much. It's been really an honor and privilege to represent you for the almost 5 months. So
thank you.
Good
Kat.
luck with everything that you do.
Oh, hey,
Thank you,
All right.
Kat. Thank you,
I got
Kat.
something else.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
Besides
Good
saying
night.
thank you to Kat, Auden is graduating this weekend.
Oh,
So
Congratulations.
everyone,
Yes.
give a little.
Go
Congratulations.
Aggies. Go UC Davis.
congratulations.
Night, night.
Auden.
Good night, everyone.
All right.